This is Bumping Into, where we have interesting conversations with people from all walks of life.
I'm Francis Populin and welcome to Bumping Into. As this is set to become episode 1, I'll give you a bit of a background on the show. Bumping Into is intended to be a very broad conversational based podcast. So don't get that confused with an interview, which is very fixed and very rigid. It's also definitely not an opinion piece. We have enough of those out there already. So what I want you to think is comedians in cars mixed with the old ABC Late Line program. It's non-rushed, low editing, but very professional. A big difference, as I see it anyway, is that we're not going to be chasing the trending and famous. We want the interesting and the unassuming. If they happen to be trending and famous, then that's fine, but that's not why we're chasing them. Social media also is not going to have a large part of what we do. It's going to be there for people to find an episode. It's not going to be there to define us. If we do this right, each show will be radically different to the next and from the last. Now, on to this one, episode 1, what has become episode 1, the Vietnam War with Denis Harahan. The Vietnam War was a costly and controversial war, spanning from 1955 to 1975. The war became a huge part of 1960s and 70s culture. My guest on the show is Denis Harahan. True to the format, I bumped into Denis. He's a retired US Special Forces officer who fought in the Vietnam War. I stopped him mid-conversation and asked him if he'd like to be on the show because what I thought he was saying was important and interesting. This is a story of his time in and after the Vietnam War. I'm sure you're probably aware, you mentioned about the Vietnam War.
Yep.
45 years was the anniversary in April of this year of it ending, which I didn't hear of. It wasn't spoken of as such, you know what I mean? No one sort of had a news story about it. Not, you know, it just seemed to be quite quiet for an important anniversary. You would think 45 years is a long time ago, but not that long ago also.
Well, when it's within your own lifetime,
yeah,
like mature age lifetime,
yeah,
it doesn't seem like that long ago.
Yeah, no. So I wanted to take you back to how you ended up there. What was the way that you ended up coming into that war?
All right. I'd gone to college, and I had always wanted to fly. That was my dream. And I took a little bit of ROTC, found I was qualified. I could qualify as a pilot with the aptitude tests and everything. You can adjust attitude, visualize attitude, like whether you're in a bank, left, right bank, climbing, descending, whatever, from the horizon. And so there I had the basic qualifications. So I figured, well, I'm going to enjoy college. I'm not going to go into ROTC. I'm going to have a good time. And then when I graduate, I'll try to sign up with the Air Force, and off I go. Didn't quite go to plan, because just before graduation, I got this little letter. And all the jokes that, Americans talk about, it literally does say greetings. Your friends and neighbors, that's what I remember. I was thinking, none of my friends, but maybe some of my neighbors had, selected you to, defend Americans, blah, 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 whatever it was. So I got drafted, basically. And I remember going into basic training. We had two completely disparate groups of people. We had a bunch of ghetto New Yorkers, Latinos, Puerto Ricans, a lot of black guys, a few white guys from New York. And we had a whole bunch of Southerners, blacks and whites. Okay. And we're playing, basic training. We get to play a little bit of Army. I'm thinking, this is not good. I don't want to go into the jungle with these guys.
So those guys have they're just plucked out of the general public. And off you go. We'll teach you broad basics.
It wasn't a lottery. It was just like anybody that, if you were in college, you had an exemption. There were certain, if you were married, you had an exemption.
Oh, okay.
If you were the only surviving son of a World War II veteran, you had an exemption. If you had a brother who had been already killed in Vietnam, you had an exemption.
And if you didn't want to go?
Well, if you didn't want to go, you had an option of either going to jail or
going to war?
getting out of the country.
Oh.
So a lot of people avoided the draft by going to Canada.
So you could just take off and...
Well, but you couldn't come back in the country because you'd be subject to arrest.
Right. So you're starting a new life somewhere else. It's get up and go.
Pretty much, yeah, if you did that. And the Canadians would grant asylum of sorts to the Americans that declined.
So they were open to it. They were like, yeah, fair enough. If you want to come over...
No, it was never publicized, but they never cracked down on.
They didn't chase you down.
Yeah, they didn't track you down. I knew a couple of guys later that had gone to Canada, and one guy actually he was originally from Florida, and he said he couldn't stand the winters.
Too cold.
Yeah, too damn cold. Too damn cold. But that was the only option. You either go in or you get go to jail, and some people did choose to go to jail, on principle.
And you're in there for the duration of the war?
I forget. Well, no, the Vietnam tours were 1 year.
Right, so you could do a year potentially.
Yeah, so if you were a straight draftee, you owed Uncle Sam 2 years, and one of them would have been in Vietnam, and then another year in some American facility somewhere. It might be Germany, it might be Korea, but more likely than not back in what they called CONUS, continental United States.
And I know you probably can't answer that because you weren't in the world wars, but what was that feeling, do you think, compared to a young boy, First World War, Second World War, being told, all right, you've got to go, son, as opposed to when they said it to your generation?
A lot of people had a lot of different reactions because this was the 60s. There were some that went very reluctantly that were definitely against the war.
Yeah.
There were some gung-ho, let's kill a commie for God types.
Yeah.
There were some that had a bit of ambivalence about the whole thing. But World War II, for instance, was a national crusade. My father, 2 days after the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor, signed up, joined the Navy.
Oh, so there was that, everyone on board. Let's try and stop this.
In World War II, yeah, definitely, because you were fighting for you could see it. It was straight black and white, a fight for democracy.
Yeah.
The Japanese attacked the Americans. There was no involvement against the Germans at the time because of the vast the public in America was against intervening in a European war.
Yeah, yeah. But obviously, once they turn up on your
once
shore,
the Japanese attacked, so we declared war on the Americans. I keep saying we. I'm an Australian now. But the Americans declared war on the Japanese, and then the Germans, because they were Japanese allies, declared war on America. So America then got into the war against Germany.
Right. Yeah, okay.
Which is what the English wanted desperately.
Yeah.
Because they were on their own at that stage, and had been for a couple of years.
And tell me if I'm wrong, the key reason that the whole Vietnam War started was the whole thing of the South was under like a French type democracy and the North was more of a communistic.
Okay, well, I mean, going back a little bit, the French had been the colonial masters of Indochina, all of Indochina. There was Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia. The time events, I don't know. I believe that North Vietnam was ruled as maybe as Vietnam, and then Annam was another. But they actually did have Vietnam divided into two.
Oh, so there was a border.
Semi-separate, not a border as such, but two administrative areas.
Yep.
Then Cambodia and then Laos. When the Japanese occupied Indochina in the war, in World War II, Vietnam had a couple of natural harbors, some of the best harbors in the world. But there was a resistance group against the Japanese that had started, basically, I mean, there had been resistance against the French going back into the 20s and 30s.
Oh, wow.
But they got it more organized. Probably don't have time to. Ho Chi Minh had studied in France and became a communist. He was a socialist, became a communist over there. But he came back. I don't know who organized what, but they formed an anti-Japanese group. And at one point toward the end of the war, some American advisors were parachuted in with weapons and to assist the Vietnamese under Ho Chi Minh fighting against the Japanese. The plan apparently was, at the end of the war, the Americans were going to push very hard against the colonial powers reestablishing themselves anywhere. But, of course, the Russians then had occupied all of Eastern Europe. You know, the Iron Curtain came down. The theory at the time was that communism was a monolithic bloc. And the communist Chinese, again, a different historical thing. Anybody that wants to find out can look it up. But the communist Chinese had been fighting against the nationalist Chinese for years and years and years. Communists finally won in 1948. They took Beijing, Shanghai, whatever. And the nationalists all retreated to Taiwan. And that's how that whole thing started.
Oh, right.
But because communism was seen as kind of a monolithic bloc, Ho Chi Minh, against the French, was seen as a threat, part of the continuing
It's just going to keep rolling
expansion
out.
of communism. So the Americans came in and supported the French taking over again. And then the French got kicked out in 1954 after the disaster at a place called Dien Bien Phu when they got their clocks cleaned, basically. And Vietnam was established into two separate territories. One was occupied by the communists. The other was ostensibly a free country. The emperor was still, they had an emperor at the time, was still sort of on the throne. He got overthrown. There were supposed to be free and fair elections nationwide at one stage, and the Americans kind of postponed it because Ho Chi Minh would have gotten in nationally with a landslide. And then that's how the various dictatorships in South Vietnam came in. That was overthrown, military presidents and corruption, vast corruption in the South. And the South, because it was so corrupt initially, the South Vietnamese army was almost like a personal army of the president to defend him, not against the communists, but against competitors within South Vietnam.
Wow. If you look at the dates, it starts in 1955.
Mm-hmm. That's when the Americans first came in with a big assistance program for the South Vietnamese.
I mean, a lot of people who don't know a lot about it would assume it's late 60s because obviously that was
The big build-up.
Yeah. But I was blown away in 1955 and then it ended in 1975. That's a massive time of fighting.
There was a book called The 10,000 Day War about the whole history of it.
Wow, okay. All right. So you've turned up and you're not happy with the crew that you're training with.
Yeah, I'm looking at these guys that from the New York side of things.
And what year? What roughly what year do you reckon?
That was 1967.
Okay, so it's been going on already for a fair while.
Oh yeah. But even the big build up in America for the major build up didn't come until 1968. That was the peak period. But I was looking at these guys from New York and thinking, because they thought Central Park was the jungle, basically.
Yeah.
So I'm looking, no, I don't want to go into the jungle with these guys. And I was qualified for officer candidate school, so I went. This is kind of neat. In the American Army, there are 3 combat branches: infantry, artillery, and armor. And then they have all like chemical service corps, and medical service corps, and signal corps, and all these other branches, they call them. The deal was, if you went in for OCS, you could nominate 3 branches of your choice. They called it a dream sheet.
Okay.
So I picked, medical service corps, I think maybe signal corps, and you had to include one military branch or one combat branch. So I figured, what do they have the least of in Vietnam? Tanks. So I selected tanks. I got infantry. The Army just said, here you are, boy, and off you go. Infantry. So I went to a place called Fort Benning. And I was taking a look around at everything, and from what I remembered in basic training, the one group in the American Army that was really, really, really professional was Special Forces, the old Green Berets. So I put my hand up for that, and I had to go through jump school training, airborne training, jump school, and then I took Ranger training, and then I went off to Special Forces training.
So how long does this take? How Are you
Oh.
you're plucked out of the war zone to do the training?
No. I'd just gone into basic training. Basic training was in the U.S.
Right.
It was about a year,
Oh,
over a year altogether. The different things. I mean, OCS was by itself was about 6 months, and you learned all about supposedly how to be a lieutenant. What they used to say with the infantry, follow me.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking I'll be a gentleman after you.
Yeah. Yeah.
But no, I got in special forces, and then with the special forces, I got assigned in Vietnam. I got into a kind of a. It was like a special operations group called Mobile Guerrilla. We worked with a Cambodian government in exile. They were anti-Sihanouk, anti-communists, and they hired their army out to the Americans. Special Forces was in the part of the American Army, but not under the American Army command in the same way that a normal infantry division was, like the 1st Division or the 25th Division or the 4th Division. So we were doing, it was like a special operations thing with these Cambods. And we ranged in things from what they call LRP missions, long-range reconnaissance patrol, where you go deep into bad guy country. You'd go with 2 Americans and 4 Cambods. You load up about, I don't know, as I recall, probably about 75 pounds of gear on your back, including the radio. And you'd be trying to find information, intelligence on what the bad guys were doing, where they were moving, what was going on, where base camps were.
So you're going in to talk to other people?
Oh, no, you're going very quietly.
So you're going in to see as close as you can get without them seeing you?
Yeah. And you carried enough weapons and ammunition that if you were sprung, you could be the baddest guy in the jungle for about 10 minutes.
And would that have been enough, you reckon, to get you out of
to break contact and
just pull back? And
yeah, there was a Creedence Clearwater had a song called "Run Through the Jungle."
Yeah,
that was, and
that was
so
based off that sort of approach. That
I used to call it a post-combat track meet. Basically, you go into the firefight and then you call the helicopters in. We were very well supported. We had a dedicated forward air controller, FAC. They flew a type of airplane called a bird dog. It was like a Piper Cub. And we would have them up virtually from first light to last light.
wow,
Not directly overhead, but within radio range because they didn't want to give away the position. So if we got into some trouble, we could call right away.
And then
We also had dedicated artillery we could call in. So we had to be our own, again, it's a military term, FO, forward observer.
Right. Okay.
So if we got into a bad enough situation, I could get on the radio and through the FAC, I could call in artillery and make the adjustments. Like you have a shell landing at point A, and it's not quite exactly where the bad guys are, so you can say drop like 50 meters, 100 meters,
Right. Okay.
right,
Yep.
50 meters, and then fire for effect. So they'd always put in 1 or 2 or 3 shells initially, to
Get your bearings.
get
Yeah,
the bearings, and then
yeah.
you make the adjustment. We could also call in air support. We had F-100s. We could call one time. We called them Huns, 100 F-100. We called in the Huns one time on an ambush mission that went badly. We were out on there was a canal called the Kim Bobo Canal. It was a big canal that ran from Cambodia into Vietnam, and it was a major. It was a supply route. The bad guys would come down at night in sampans with weapons, ammunition, food, whatever, for the Viet Cong area. Viet Cong,
Yep.
not the North Vietnamese. And we had set up on on this canal bank. I was on the left flank security. We had a kill zone. That's where the main part of the ambush was. Then right flank security and rear security. And the canal, there was a big canal bank, and then there was an irrigation ditch because it was behind us was just an old abandoned sugarcane plantation.
Oh, okay.
So nothing happened that night. And, so we're waiting for the helicopters to pick us up in the morning. And I've got still, you sleep with your rucksack against a tree or something like that on your back. And have your weapon on your chest. So I was trying to catch a little bit of shut-eye because the cam boats couldn't be relied to stay awake all night. So anyhow, nothing happened. I'm catching some shut-eye, waiting for the helicopters to come, and one of my cam boats, Tiwi, Lieutenant, Tiwi, VC come. So I look up, and coming down the irrigation ditch, there's 6 guys in single file. They knew they were looking for us. They were, kind of crouched over. They had their weapons in alert position and looking. So I called the kill zone. He was the commander of the whole mission. I told him what we had, and he said, well, initiate contact at your discretion. In other words, we were the hunters that were now being hunted.
Wow.
So anyhow, to make a long story short, we opened up on them. They opened up on us. And then behind us, everything just, they had a whole bunch of guys coming up behind us. They didn't know where we were exactly. They were doing kind of like a sweep, trying to find out. And once the gunfire started, they opened up. Well, we called in for support. And at that point, my little group, 6 of us, 4 of us, I should say, were down at the left flank about 25 meters away from the main area. And we were taking the brunt of the fire. Not accurate. They were just like firing in the area. And I'm thinking, one of these things you look back on and it's kind of really ridiculous. Okay, there's no cover as such because it's just a canal bank and you got bushes and trees, bamboo banana trees, which aren't particularly good cover. Bullets will chop those things down.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking, do we scramble to the back side of the canal or the canal side of the bank, of the canal bank, for cover, which would then expose us if they were on the other side of the canal, completely expose us.
Yeah.
As naked as the day you were born type of thing. Or do we kind of just flatten out on the ground and use concealment so they couldn't see us, hide behind bushes and things. So this is what's going on. Do we do this? Do we do this? Do we do this?
Yeah, split second, you're trying to process.
And Fat came on over and he gave me my call sign. He said, can you pop we carry these signal flags, like international orange, iridescent orange, and they were maybe about 3/4 of a meter square. So I rolled over my back and you hold it in 2 hands over your chest and you pop it out.
Right, so he can
and you
see
keep doing this.
Right.
So it makes an irregular sight. And got you tagged. He said, get your heads down. Looked up and there's a flight of F-100s streaking in. And we could hear the radio, him talking to the fighters, the fighter bombers. And I heard him say pickle and looked up and 4 bombs dropped off the wings of the lead airplane. I mean, he could see all this, and the bombs are coming down, and these were I think they called them drag bombs. They had like a fin that would open up toward the rear, from the front to the rear, to drag the bomb. Because when the bomb releases, it's going at the same speed of the airplane.
Oh, of course. Yeah.
So with the drag, they could estimate where it was going to hit. So I'm looking, and all of a sudden, it looked like these damn bombs are coming right down on us. And we just got as flat as we could. And the explosions were close enough because he could see the bad guys from the air. You're looking down through a cane field, there's no concealment from the air.
Yeah.
He could spot exactly where they were. So he was trying to bring the bombs right on top of them. And when the first one went off, again, this is all like canal country. They do get a lot of rains. A lot of it's still boggy even during the dry season. The whole canal, just the bank that we were on, was just shaking and vibrating from the bombs. And but eventually the fight was over. And, by this time the gunships came in with the helicopter escort that was picking us up. They spotted these guys and just and it was all over. Yeah, because again they were in the open. So the guns were coming in with rockets and miniguns and everything, and bad guys broke contact. They got out, but a bunch of them didn't quite make the retreat.
No, that's amazing. To think, lucky you had those resources available. Otherwise, you're a sitting duck.
Well, no, it wasn't lucky. This was all planned. This was all part of our operation. We were doing some special operations, I guess you could say, and
so it's all calculated. You've sort of
we
predetermined.
But we had these assets on call.
Yep.
It wasn't like we need to call them up and let's see if we can get
and
something.
hope that they're free.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we had dedicated, like the artillery was called tubes. And I think we had, like from whatever the nearest artillery base was, we would have, I think, 3 tubes that would be on standby dedicated to where we were working. Yeah. But the thing is that even at the time, and I guess I don't know how this goes to mindset or anything, but some guys never made the adjustment to being in Vietnam.
Yeah, and rightfully so.
Yeah.
It's
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Understandably so. I just looked at it as this is reality. This is where I am.
Yeah.
Just make the best of where you are, and treat it accordingly. I didn't want to be there.
Yeah.
I make no bones about it. I had no desire to be there.
Yeah. But you just dealt with it and moved forward.
Well, you make the best of a bad hand, basically.
Yeah.
You play the hand you're dealt.
Yeah.
But I was with a very professional group, and this was the...
And that would have been the difference, because
Oh, yeah.
that group would have most likely had a similar mindset to yourself.
Oh, God, yeah. At the time, in the Special Forces, for the enlisted men, the Americans have, again, going through the ranks, there's private, corporal, there's a sergeant with the stripes. There's, private is 1 stripe,
Oh, okay.
corporal is 2 stripes, sergeant is 3 stripes. But then there was a platoon sergeant, which was 3 stripes and what we called a rocker, a curved, like a half circle below the 3 stripes. And then there was a staff sergeant, and it went up from there. Let's see, a private was E1, corporal was E2, sergeant was E3, E4, E5. You could not be, nothing below E5 was in Special Forces. These are guys that were mostly career NCOs, non-commissioned officers, sergeants.
So that's a completely different mindset to...
And Special Forces at the time, I believe, and again, I might be wrong here, but roughly of all the, because it was strictly volunteer, you weren't assigned Special Forces. Officers were, but enlisted men. I think the success rate of getting through training group was about 3%.
3%?
Yeah.
So really the best of the best. It wasn't an even 50-50 chance.
No. These were the best that the Army had to offer.
Wow.
No ifs, ands, or buts about it.
Yeah. You've definitely done well to be in that category.
Well, again, I had volunteered for Special Forces, but this was the unit I was assigned to when I got into Special Forces. Whether anything that I had demonstrated going through training group or in OCS, I have no idea. Honestly, no idea. But that's the unit I was assigned to. Oh. And we had, our CO was a guy named Jim Greitz, who actually made a lot of headlines. They pronounce it grits. But he became later on one of these survival idiots up in Idaho or someplace.
Oh, okay.
You know, the survivalists, you know, we get away, the government's a vast conspiracy to undermine us. We need to strike out with our own freedom.
Yep, and the ones that have, they prep for everything with their own.
Yeah, that was his mindset. But in the civilian world, he was weird. In the military, you'd follow him to hell.
Yeah, and you can see why then, because of the discipline, the planning.
Yeah.
Definitely.
There were some people that were good combat soldiers, lousy civilian type peacetime soldiers.
Wow.
And I think one of the big drawbacks that we had during the Vietnam War is that I won't say a lot, but a number of relatively senior officers had gone through the 1950s mindset, and it was like a numbers game. You do this to get this promotion. You do this to get this promotion. It wasn't necessarily based on, I guess, talent, but it was as much based on what butts you kissed, what politics you knew, what games you were able to play better than somebody else.
Basically.
But then when the war, well, it was like World War II. At the beginning of World War II, Dwight Eisenhower, who became the supreme commander for the Allied unit, was a colonel.
Right.
He wasn't even a general.
So a lot of that stuff hasn't changed today.
So
and-
yeah, so when a war comes out, the cream rises to the top
yeah.
by definition.
Yep.
I don't know if you saw the that series called Band of Brothers
No.
about World War II. It was about a group. It's true. This thing's all true. A group in the 101st Airborne, just a small company in the 101st Airborne Division, and the series follows them all the way through the war, and they're all real people, actors playing their parts, but they're all real people. And the guy that was their commanding officer in training before they got into the war was a captain. He was hated and loathed by everybody under his command. But there was a scene later in the war, about maybe 1944, so it's like 4 years in. One of the lieutenants under his command was now a major, and he was still a captain, but not even a combat captain. He was like working in supplies.
Oh, okay.
So like he had the power before the war. He was a captain with all the different connections and everything, a gentleman, I guess, and what they called an officer and a gentleman. But he never advanced any further because he did not have the talent, the qualifications, the qualities needed for a combat situation.
Yeah, yep.
Judgment, whatever you want to call it.
Would you say the training that you got, did that give you any other life skill set after? Was it a thing of
Oh, yeah.
you carried a lot of that, the mindset? I mean, I'm assuming they would have touched a lot on this is not going to be nice. You're going to have to mentally deal with a lot of things. Was that touched on in your training?
No, not at all.
So
Not
is
at
it-
all. But indirectly, I mean, not from that first tour. I came back after my first tour and eventually went to helicopter flight school.
So how long? So how long were you there for? So you 68ish. You went over?
Well, yeah, 68, virtually all of 68, part of 69. Then was it 70, 71, 72, thereabouts.
Okay.
Yeah. So when I went to helicopter flight school, that's what gave me the career that I eventually had. Because as I told you earlier, I'd always dreamed of being a pilot. Yeah. And because I was an officer, I had a longer obligation than just the 2 years. And I reasoned that if I go in for a second, I would be sent back to Vietnam for a second tour. And I didn't particularly want to be on the ground, so I put my hand up for flight school, helicopter
Makes
flight
sense,
school.
Yeah.
And while I was waiting, this was good. I ended up living, I was assigned as an advisor to a National Guard group in New York City, Brooklyn, actually. And I ended up living with 7 Pan Am pilots in like a semi-mansion in Forest Hills, New York.
Oh, wow.
And this was like 1969, which was a great place
Yeah.
to be at the time.
Yeah.
And the house, I don't know if this would be seen as political, hot and cold running stewardesses. That's all I can say. So this was, I died and gone to heaven.
Well, yeah, I suppose that's the pinnacle of the whole free time that, Woodstock had been. And
Yeah. Well, I actually got to
Yeah.
Woodstock as well,
Oh, okay.
which was, just for what it's worth, the 4-day festival was, if you bought tickets, was for the princely sum of $25,
$25.
which was actually a fairly good chunk of money in
That would
1969.
have been a fair bit.
But
yeah.
$25.
Yeah.
You go down and see on my 24th birthday, I went down with my girlfriend. We went to see Hair, matinee on Broadway. We went down to Greenwich Village for dinner, and then we went to a place called the Fillmore East Auditorium. There were 2 great rock emporiums at the time, owned by a guy named Bill Graham, Fillmore East and Fillmore West in San Francisco. And any rock band worth a damn would play one of the Fillmores,
Oh,
or
okay.
both. So my 24th birthday, it was an old converted movie theater, too. We were in the front row of the balcony, and there was, Chuck Berry was the opening act, which was not bad.
Yeah.
Then Elvin Bishop Blues Band. Elvin Bishop, still around, killer blues player. And then Creedence was the main act,
Okay.
when Proud Mary was #1 in the entire galaxy.
So, yeah, that's a big deal.
Yeah, and we were in the front row of the balcony looking straight down. By the time Creedence came out, the whole place smelled like a burning rope factory, if you catch my drift. But anyhow, yeah, I went off to helicopter flight school and did my second tour of flying helicopters. And I came back. I had snaggled a class date, even though I was a helicopter pilot, with an airline. I wanted to fly with an airline called Braniff Airlines. And that was looking pretty good until the Arabs pulled the plug on one of the oil embargoes. All the class dates were canceled. By this time, I'd had 7 years in the Army altogether.
Jeez.
I didn't know how to work for a living because the Army certainly wasn't
Yeah.
working for a living as such. And I got a job flying helicopters in Indonesia. And went over to Indonesia. We worked 2 weeks on and 2 weeks off. We had 75% discounts on about 6 different airlines. And I met a couple from St. Kilda on one of my little. I spent a lot of my break time in Bali.
Yep.
And Bali in the mid 70s was absolute heaven. I met this couple from St. Kilda and went down to visit them, and got set up on a blind date, which turned out to be game, set, and match, and ended up in Australia.
That's it, yeah. And that would have been, so what year was that in St. Kilda?
Oh, gee, that would have been 76,
Okay, all right.
thereabouts.
Yep. So St. Kilda was a wild place back in the 70s too. That was known for its party
Yeah, well,
lifestyle.
well,
Yeah.
this couple I met did know how to party.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Bali back at the time, though, was just, like I say, it was just absolute heaven. There were 2 hotels on the beach on Kuta side. There was one in Kuta and one in Ligian, and then the rest, it was just open beach, completely open beach. There were no big main roads or anywhere. The main road in Kuta was called Jalan Pantai, and it was semi-paved. There were no sidewalks as such. 10 o'clock at night, everything buttoned up.
Jeez.
No discos. There was one bar that stayed open. It was on Ligian Road going down. Ligian, I'll get to that in a minute. Ligian was about a kilometer away. And this place stayed open until midnight. So everybody went back. They stayed in these places called Losmans. They're like a homestay, motel type of thing. And nowadays you go up there, and there are hotels that cater to the Australians, that cater to the French, cater to the Germans. Then it was all in.
Okay. Yeah.
And broken English was, English of some degree, was the main source of communication. You're meeting people from all over the world,
Yeah.
literally. And one of the funniest things I saw was a French guy who spoke no German trying to pick up a German lady who spoke no French.
Jeez.
The whole thing is going on in broken English.
So they picked the English as their bridge.
Well, that was the only thing they had.
Yeah.
Because a lot of Europeans studied some English in school. So I mean, not to make too fine a point on it, but when 2 people don't have any language in common except for one, and that's not particularly fluent,
Yeah.
you cut to the heart of the matter right away.
Yes. Yeah. So there's no small chat.
And it didn't work out though for the French guy. Put it that way.
And all these areas. So even back the islands you've been to, Vietnam. Have you been back?
I haven't been back to Vietnam. I never got a chance to. I would like to.
Because it's supposed to be quite a hot tourist destination now.
Yeah. What I'd like, I mean, if I could go back, one place I'd like to go would be a town called Tay Ninh. We did a lot of our operations out of a little French it's a Michelin rubber plantation.
Oh, right, okay.
It just outside of Tay Ninh, and there's a religion endemic or specific, I should say, to part of Vietnam called Cao Dai, and they again, this is as I recall, it's largely based on Buddhism, but some of their saints are like Karl Marx, George Bernard Shaw, Jesus,
Right.
Muhammad. They cover
So
everything.
they've, like a hybrid, they've brought a lot of things in to form their own.
But I'd like to go back and see Tay Ninh. I know I wouldn't recognize it, but I'd like to go back and see Tay Ninh.
Because it would be interesting to see from how you last left to what it is now.
Oh.
I mean, it would have to be night and day different, but I wonder if there would be that sense of, this bit still looks the same.
Yeah.
It'd be,
I think it was a German writer named Thomas Mann said you can never go home again.
I imagine it would be tough for a lot of people to go back to that too.
A lot of American GIs have, because there are battlefield tours.
Yeah.
They can. They'll take you through.
Same as the World War II ones through Europe. They
Yeah,
have the tours.
yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and that would be an interesting thing to do. Obviously, it's got a sad underpin about what went on, but it would be fascinating.
Well, if you Ken Burns did that series a bunch of years ago on the American Civil War, which was possibly some of the best television ever done. And he did a series on Vietnam. It's on Netflix.
Oh, okay.
Interestingly, he interviewed both Americans, North Vietnamese Army survivors, and Viet Cong to get different perspectives.
Yeah.
Which is how far we've moved. I mean, it's over 50 years ago.
Yeah.
I was 23 when I was over there the first time. I'm 75 now.
A young 75. You got to add that bit in.
Pardon?
A young 75.
In the head, perhaps. I have it's just like a theory I've got that you can, depending on how you live your life, there will be a time when everything in your life is running perfectly. You are where you want to be. You're doing what you want to do. You're making decent money, and you have no obligations. And for me, it was that period in Indonesia.
Oh, so that was the sweet spot.
That was my sweet spot. And if something like that happens to you, to a certain extent, the eyes that you look out to the world with are the eyes that looked out at the world at that time. Yeah. And perhaps it does keep you younger because it was so good that has stayed with you.
Yeah. So it's sort of become your base, your
I don't know what
tone.
Growing up is inevitable, or growing old is inevitable. Growing up is optional.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. So I've got a few things that I had dug up, some did you knows about the Vietnam War that I didn't know. So the total tonnage of bombs that were dropped on the north surpassed that of all the bombs dropped for Germany, Italy, Japan during World War II. Mm-hmm. That's an astronomical amount of bombs, for one country.
Well, we'd see every once in a while. We were going on an insertion or coming out from on an extraction. Every once in a while, you could look over someplace in the area we were operating in, and you'd see like flashes. You could actually see the shock waves coming up through the trees. It was a B-52 strike, what they called an arc light. They'd have 3 B-52s. They got some intelligence that in this area, they were a bunch of bad guys, so they just unloaded a whole bunch of bombs, dropped it in the jungle. Sometimes they got it right.
So
we'd go in sometimes on what was called a BDA, bomb damage assessment, and pour over some base camp that had gotten smacked really hard. And boy, what those bombs could do is just absolutely 750-pound bombs, like strings of them, through 3 airplanes in a trail formation, just in one concentrated area. But yeah, that's, I don't know how many tonnage was lost in just the jungle, let alone what hit the towns and cities and up around Haiphong and Hanoi.
Yeah, and there's still over 1,500 U.S. soldiers unaccounted for.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Which that's a lot.
Still kind of a big deal in the U.S., the MIAs, what they call missing in action, MIAs.
Over 1,500 of them, which is a lot. So I mean, even the sheer numbers that went in was massive, I think. What have you got here? So the cost was, in today's money, over $1 trillion.
Mm-hmm. So I think at one stage I read somewhere $1 million a day.
And when it was over, what was your thoughts? What was it like? Were you like, what was that all about? Or thank God it's over? Or
I still remember I was in graduate school at the time. And when they announced, we knew that the South was losing. Yeah. When they came across the DMZ, the NVA came down with tanks and everything. And there was a tremendous battle, I forget where it was, where the South Vietnamese Army acquitted itself on K, I think it was, very well against the North. But, I mean, that was just like basically they were putting their finger in a hole in the dike when there were about 1,000 other holes in the dike. they plugged one of them. But when Saigon fell, one of my first thoughts was the Cambodians that I've been working with. What's happened to them? What's going to happen to them? Because you got, obviously, in a year when you're working with these people as closely as we were, because they had...
Yeah, you each depend on each other.
At the edge of our camp, they had their families.
Yep.
They brought their entire families along. We'd be invited over every once in a while to have dinner with them. They were our people. They were. I had direct responsibility for 3 teams of 10 men each. 30 Cambodians were my immediate responsibility. And just by the way, one funny little thing, I was walking into the Cambodian village with one of them one time, and I didn't know it at the time, but in a lot of Southeast Asia, 2 men who were very good friends will walk holding hands. Oh, okay. And this guy just took my hand as we're walking along, and I'm thinking, I'm not going to the jungle with him again. I found out later what it all meant. Yeah. But we got very close with him, and that was my first thought when Saigon finally fell. What's going to happen to the people I've been working with?
And what was ultimately
no idea. Of them? No idea. Absolutely no idea. Maybe a lot of them had gone back to fight against the Khmer Rouge, and then they would have gotten folded over when the KR took over, and the killing fields in Cambodia, if you remember any of the history of that. I really don't know. But that was my immediate thought, and I just thought, what a waste. We put all this time, and all this energy, and all these men that never made it home again. Yeah. For what? We didn't even buy time. Yeah. We didn't even buy time. And now, the people that we're bitterly fighting are part of the whole world community. Yeah. It was, I guess, a massive deflation.
Yeah, definitely. It would have to be. It would have to be. Yeah.
And I know that when I went to visit my brother on one of my trips home. I say home. I still say home. I get over there and I talk about
this home. Yeah,
Australia going home. But I went to the wall in Washington and walked up to my ear and found too many names that I knew, guys I'd gone to college with or people that I'd trained with. And it was, when you see something like that, when it's right there, you read about it, you can maybe read in a newspaper about things, but when you see that, and the way that they did the wall, it just says, Bernie Bazatz, 1947, 1968.
That's a short span.
Well, the big thing about that war that a lot of people today don't realize is because it was a draft-fueled war, that there were disproportionately a hell of a lot of 18 and 19-year-old kids that were going over to fight that thing. World War II, again, was different because it encompassed 18 and 19-year-olds up through 30, 35-year-olds.
Yeah.
My dad, I think, was probably 24, I guess, when the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor and he signed up. No, he would have been older than that. 26.
26
when he went over, when he signed up. And that encompassed a huge disparity in ranges because people would quit their jobs. They were employed. They had the beginnings of careers. And they went to fight for their country. They tried to tell us in Vietnam we were fighting for our country, but the truth is very few of us, I think, really thought we were fighting for our country. My first tour, I was well behind it. We got to do this. My second tour, I started to really, really sour on it. When I got out and I was back in graduate school, I was pretty ambivalent. But I thought that when Congress actually pulled funding for the South Vietnamese, that I felt that was a betrayal because we had promised them as part of the peace accords with the American withdrawal from Vietnam. We had promised them we would support their their military. And when they pulled the funding, it was just a matter of time before South Vietnam folded. But yeah, it was a different war. It's my attitude shortly after that was, if they ever want another war and they want me, they're going to have to come and find me.
Yeah, that's fair enough.
Because I'm not turning up at the door.
Yeah.
And even then, they can get me in kicking and screaming.
Yeah. And also, I'm assuming at the time there was quite a big public, the backlash against the war was going on. It wasn't the homecoming of the World War II.
Oh no, not even close. No.
There was that as well. So you've gone through all this, you've done all this, you've lost all this.
Well, when I came back from my first tour, we came back we still in uniform, and in San Francisco we get disembarked, turning in all our equipment and everything, giving an airfares home, and walking through San Francisco Airport, I was proud as could be, man. I had my green beret on, and I had a couple of hero badges that I got by doing a couple of stupid things. Really, a hero is somebody who completely snaps. His logic goes out the window.
Puts everything on the line to get something done.
Well, when they were reading about, when they were reading off one of these things that I got, they're reading, and Lieutenant Harahan, da 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 da, and I'm thinking to myself, I didn't do that. No, they got me confused with somebody else. Not me, but just the looks I got. In some cases, just complete transparency, looking right through you. Some with visual, not hatred, dislike.
Dislike?
Yeah.
Really?
I mean, looking at baby killer. All the Green Berets, we had the reputation for, savagery but we were not involved in the conventional war in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
Most of the special forces units were in what they called A teams, strung along the Cambodian, Laotian borders, and they were set up as like bulwarks to try training with local people and giving them medical care, because a medic was assigned to every unit. And special forces medics were very, very highly trained. Somebody said, I think probably the equivalent of about 2 years of medical school.
Wow, okay.
So helping the local people and everything, but they were basically in their A teams and would poke their noses out once in a while to see what the bad guys were up to. There was one that we staged near that place called Tay Ninh. It was a small little village called Katoom, which was also known as Kaboom, because it was a kilometer from the Cambodian border, and they used to use it for target practice.
Oh,
You're learning the mortar crews again. Right 50, left 50, add 50, to zero in on a target.
Yeah.
But that's what Special Forces was doing primarily. We weren't part of the Project Phoenix thing, where it was a CIA program where suspected Viet Cong were executed by a special group of South Vietnamese aided by CIA people. I mean, Project Phoenix. This is no secret. It's on the internet, and it was a brutal war. Period. The Viet Cong, after Tet, up near Hue, they found 1,800 civilians that had been killed and buried, women and children, to terrorize the other South Vietnamese government supporters.
Yeah, so there's a lot of...
Yeah, they were. I mean, they were. It was more of a civil war than anything else, pure and simple.
Yeah.
But they weren't fighting using the Geneva Convention by any means.
No.
They were fighting the way that they thought they had to fight.
Yeah. It's sad that you don't know what became of, it's ended, and you've none the wiser as to what became of the people you were there to protect and help.
Well, even I remember looking up my old unit, and I found a couple of names of some of these guys that were virulently anti-Obama.
Oh, okay.
So they probably big Trump supporters.
Yep.
And but again, in the nature of things, the people that would gravitate toward a unit like Special Forces would have been, by and large, politically to the right of center.
Oh, okay.
If we were discussing politics at the time at all,
Yeah, yep.
which we weren't. I mean, nobody was. We weren't. I mean, all of us that were there were effectively on the same side. I grew in a different direction after I got out of it all. So my politics are well and truly on the left now. But again, most of my compatriots were very right-wing in some cases.
Wow, that's amazing, isn't it? The same experience, same age.
Well, no, not the same experience, because part of the experience was after the war.
Yeah.
The ones that stayed in the war or stayed in the Army, probably a lot of them would have had almost the same feeling that some Germans did after World War I, that they were betrayed. Hamburger Hill was damn close to what it was like. When you're in that situation, you're not fighting for your unit or for your country. You're fighting for the guy next to you. Yeah. You're fighting for that little group of people that you're with, and the hell with anything else. Yeah. You don't care about the enemy per se. You don't care about the next platoon or the next squad. You're fighting for your own. And so they have a completely different perspective, the grunts, to what I had. Aviators, again, would have a completely different perspective.
Thank you very much for your time and your information. I've really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I probably just rabbited on a little bit too much.
Oh
but
no! Look, that's what it is. That's what I wanted it to be. It's not. It's the best way to describe it is an interview is like a game of golf. You hit once and off you go to the next hole. But a conversation is tennis. It's back and forth, and the ball can go anywhere in the court.
Mm-hmm.
So
okay, yeah,
that's exactly what I wanted it to be. So thank you very much for coming in.
And just by the way, apropos of nothing, but if you are a golfer, if you've never seen it, go onto YouTube and look up Robin Williams on golf.
Okay.
The long version.
All right.
Because he manages to tell it from the perspective of the drunken Scotsman who invents the game.
Oh. All right. We'll have to chase it up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It really is. If it doesn't get a laugh out of you, there's something really wrong with your sense of humor.
Thank you to my guest, Denis, for his time and his thoughts. If you know anyone that would enjoy the show, please do share it with them. You can also find out more at bumpinginto.com.au. That's the show, and I'll catch you next time on Bumping Into.